They say the dead can't speak, but my father never really needed words to haunt me. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up the gravel driveway was how quiet the old house had become. It stood at the edge of the pine forest, half hidden in fog, its gabled roof like a hunched figure watching me return. The windows were dark. The porch sagged. Nothing moved. Even the wind, always strong in these parts, seemed to hold its breath. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield. The last time I'd been here, I was 17. That was 15 years ago. My father and I hadn't spoken in the last 5. Not really. A few cold emails. A one-line birthday text. Then silence. Now he was dead. Heart attack, they said. Alone, down in the basement. The house key still worked. The lock gave a reluctant click, like it had aged without me. Inside, everything smelled faintly of old wood, mildew, and dust. Nothing had changed. The wallpaper still peeled in the corners. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked like it always had, slow, steady, like a heartbeat just a bit off rhythm. The funeral was yesterday. A small affair. 2 neighbors I didn't recognize, the old priest from town, and me. I delivered the eulogy from a printed page. Flat words. No tears. I wasn't sure what to say about a man who had never really let me know him. They buried him under gray skies, in the family plot on the edge of the woods. My mother had been gone for years. Cancer. She got a headstone. My father had chosen to be cremated. I carried his ashes in a cheap brass urn that didn't suit him at all. Now, I placed the urn on the mantel above the cold fireplace, surrounded by old family photographs that had faded into sepia over time. A younger version of him stared back at me from one of them, standing stiffly beside my mother. His eyes were sharp even then, like he was already listening to something no one else could hear. I dropped my duffel bag in the hallway and walked through the house, letting memories crawl out of the shadows. The dining room, where meals were eaten in silence. The staircase with a loose third step that creaked like a warning. The study, where I wasn't allowed unless I was summoned. I paused outside the basement door. It looked the same. Thick, wooden, painted the color of dry blood. There was a dent in the middle of it, like someone had once struck it hard with a fist or a head. He used to spend hours down there. Days sometimes. When I was a kid, I'd sit on the top step and listen. No sounds of tools or repairs, just silence. Sometimes, though, I thought I heard murmuring. A low voice, like he was speaking to someone under his breath. And sometimes he answered. He told me never to go down there. Not once, not ever. When I asked why, he'd say, "That place isn't meant for you, Navis." I opened the door now. The hinges groaned like they hadn't been moved in weeks. The basement stairs were steep, the air colder than it should have been. A faint metallic scent rose up to meet me. Not blood, older than that. Rust, maybe, or something that had been forgotten for too long. I didn't go all the way down. Not yet. Just stood there at the top of the stairs, one hand gripping the frame. That was when I heard it. A whisper, barely there, like breath against my ear. Navis. I spun around. No one was behind me. The hallway was empty. Quiet. I closed the basement door slowly and locked it. Whatever secrets my father kept down there had waited this long. They could wait one more night. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't be able to stay away. Not for long. The house had already begun to wake up, and I just stepped back inside. I found the entrance by accident. It was early evening, and the house had grown quiet in the way only an old place can, settling with soft groans and sighs in the wooden beams. Dust floated in the air like ash, lit by thin strands of light sneaking through the windows. I had been wandering aimlessly from room to room, running my fingers across surfaces that hadn't been touched in years. Every corner seemed to hold the weight of something unsaid. Then I ended up in the basement. The stairs creaked beneath my weight as I descended. The air grew colder with each step, the musty scent of earth and mildew wrapping around me. My father had always kept the basement locked when I was younger. When I asked him why, he'd only say, "Nothing down there but junk and bad air." I guess that wasn't a complete lie. At first, it seemed like any other cluttered basement, cardboard boxes, rusty tools, a dead water heater in the corner. But near the back wall, behind a leaning shelf full of paint cans and old camping gear, something caught my eye, a faint line, vertical and too clean to be a crack, running down the wall. I pushed the shelf aside. Dust coughed into the air. Behind it was a panel of smooth metal, not concrete or wood like the rest of the basement. A small indentation at eye level looked almost like a fingerprint scanner, but it was older, just a recessed circle, probably for a key. But the metal was cold. Too cold. I could feel it through the sleeve of my shirt. I didn't need a key. There was a latch hidden behind a loose tile on the wall. I only found it because I tripped, trying to get a better look at the panel. When I steadied myself, my hand knocked the tile inward, and I heard the soft click of a lock sliding open. The panel hissed slightly as it unsealed, like something releasing a held breath. Then, slowly it swung open. Inside was a narrow staircase. Concrete steps led down into darkness, and a stale draft crept up from the tunnel like the exhale of something sleeping too long. I should have turned around, but I grabbed the flashlight from the workbench and stepped inside. The air was thick, damp, and oddly warm. The walls were reinforced with steel beams, lined with corroded pipes and wiring. It wasn't just a storm shelter. It was a bunker. The flashlight's beam flickered over shelves stocked with long-expired cans of food, rusted ration tins, old blankets folded with military precision. Gas masks hung from hooks like hollow faces. A rotary phone sat silent on a desk bolted to the wall, its cord coiled like a snake. Everything was coated in a thin film of dust, but nothing looked disturbed, as if it had been waiting, untouched, since the Cold War. And then I saw it. At the very end of the corridor, past the supply shelves and the bunk beds, there was another door. This one was different. Solid steel, heavy, with a thick wool lock in the center and no handle. The kind of door you'd see in a submarine or a fallout shelter. But what chilled me wasn't the way it looked. It was the way it felt. Standing in front of it, I felt pressure in my ears like when you're driving up a mountain and your head needs to pop. And there was a sound, not a noise exactly, more like the idea of one. A hum buried deep in the bones of the bunker. Too low to hear. Too present to ignore. I reached out and touched the metal. It was warm. That was the moment I remember my father's voice, sharp and cold in a childhood memory I hadn't thought about in years. Never open that door, Navis. Never. But the door had no keyhole, no keypad, no obvious way in. And yet, as I stared at it longer, I could have sworn I saw something shift in the metal. Just a ripple, a slight twitch, as if the surface was breathing. I backed away, heart thudding. I didn't know what was behind that door, but I knew one thing for sure. It was still in there, and it was waiting. They say the dead can't speak, but my father never really needed words to haunt me. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up the gravel driveway was how quiet the old house had become. It stood at the edge of the pine forest, half hidden in fog, its gabled roof like a hunched figure watching me return. The windows were dark. The porch sagged. Nothing moved. Even the wind, always strong in these parts, seemed to hold its breath. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield. The last time I'd been here, I was 17. That was 15 years ago. My father and I hadn't spoken in the last 5. Not really. A few cold emails. A one-line birthday text. Then silence. Now he was dead. Heart attack, they said. Alone, down in the basement. The house key still worked. The lock gave a reluctant click, like it had aged without me. Inside, everything smelled faintly of old wood, mildew, and dust. Nothing had changed. The wallpaper still peeled in the corners. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked like it always had, slow, steady, like a heartbeat just a bit off rhythm. The funeral was yesterday. A small affair. 2 neighbors I didn't recognize, the old priest from town, and me. I delivered the eulogy from a printed page. Flat words. No tears. I wasn't sure what to say about a man who had never really let me know him. They buried him under gray skies, in the family plot on the edge of the woods. My mother had been gone for years, cancer. She got a headstone. My father had chosen to be cremated. I carried his ashes in a cheap brass urn that didn't suit him at all. Now, I placed the urn on the mantel above the cold fireplace, surrounded by old family photographs that had faded into sepia over time. A younger version of him stared back at me from one of them, standing stiffly beside my mother. His eyes were sharp even then, like he was already listening to something no one else could hear. I dropped my duffel bag in the hallway and walked through the house, letting memories crawl out of the shadows. The dining room, where meals were eaten in silence. The staircase with the loose third step that creaked like a warning. The study, where I wasn't allowed unless I was summoned. I paused outside the basement door. It looked the same. Thick, wooden, painted the color of dried blood. There was a dent in the middle of it, like someone had once struck it hard with a fist or a head. He used to spend hours down there. Days sometimes. When I was a kid, I'd sit on the top step and listen. No sounds of tools or repairs, just silence. Sometimes, though, I thought I heard murmuring. A low voice, like he was speaking to someone under his breath. And sometimes, he answered. He told me never to go down there. Not once, not ever. When I asked why, he'd say, "That place isn't meant for you, Navis." I opened the door now. The hinges groaned like they hadn't been moved in weeks. The basement stairs were steep, the air colder than it should have been. A faint metallic scent rose up to meet me. Not blood, older than that. Rust, maybe, or something that had been forgotten for too long. I didn't go all the way down. Not yet. Just stood there at the top of the stairs, one hand gripping the frame. That was when I heard it. A whisper, barely there, like breath against my ear. "Navis." I spun around. No one was behind me. The hallway was empty. Quiet. I closed the basement door slowly and locked it. Whatever secrets my father kept down there had waited this long. They could wait one more night. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't be able to stay away. Not for long. The house had already begun to wake up, and I just stepped back inside. I found the entrance by accident. It was early evening, and the house had grown quiet in the way only an old place can, settling with soft groans and sighs in the wooden beams. Dust floated in the air like ash, lit by thin strands of light sneaking through the windows. I had been wandering aimlessly from room to room, running my fingers across surfaces that hadn't been touched in years. Every corner seemed to hold the weight of something unsaid. Then I ended up in the basement. The stairs creaked beneath my weight as I descended. The air grew colder with each step, the musty scent of earth and mildew wrapping around me. My father had always kept the basement locked when I was younger. When I asked him why, he'd only say, "Nothing down there but junk and bad air." I guess that wasn't a complete lie. At first, it seemed like any other cluttered basement. Cardboard boxes, rusty tools, a dead water heater in the corner. But near the back wall, behind a leaning shelf full of paint cans and old camping gear, something caught my eye. A faint line, vertical and too clean to be a crack, running down the wall. I pushed the shelf aside. Dust coughed into the air. Behind it was a panel of smooth metal, not concrete or wood like the rest of the basement. A small indentation at eye level looked almost like a fingerprint scanner, but it was older, just a recessed circle, probably for a key. But the metal was cold. Too cold. I could feel it through the sleeve of my shirt. I didn't need a key. There was a latch hidden behind a loose tile on the wall. I only found it because I tripped, trying to get a better look at the panel. When I steadied myself, my hand knocked the tile inward, and I heard the soft click of a lock sliding open. The panel hissed slightly as it unsealed, like something releasing a held breath. Then, slowly it swung open. Inside was a narrow staircase. Concrete steps led down into darkness, and a stale draft crept up from the tunnel, like the exhale of something sleeping too long. I should have turned around, but I grabbed the flashlight from the workbench and stepped inside. The air was thick, damp, and oddly warm. The walls were reinforced with steel beams, lined with corroded pipes and wiring. It wasn't just a storm shelter. It was a bunker. The flashlight's beam flickered over shelves stocked with long-expired cans of food, rusted ration tins, old blankets folded with military precision. Gas masks hung from hooks like hollow faces. A rotary phone sat silent on a desk bolted to the wall, its cord coiled like a snake. Everything was coated in a thin film of dust, but nothing looked disturbed, as if it had been waiting, untouched, since the Cold War. And then I saw it. At the very end of the corridor, past the supply shelves and the bunk beds, there was another door. This one was different. Solid steel, heavy, with a thick wool lock in the center and no handle. The kind of door you'd see in a submarine or a fallout shelter. But what chilled me wasn't the way it looked. It was the way it felt. Standing in front of it, I felt pressure in my ears like when you're driving up a mountain and your head needs to pop. And there was a sound, not a noise exactly, more like the idea of one. A hum buried deep in the bones of the bunker. Too low to hear, too present to ignore. I reached out and touched the metal. It was warm. That was the moment I remembered my father's voice, sharp and cold in a childhood memory. I I hadn't thought about in years. Never opened that door, Navis. Never. But the door had no keyhole, no keypad, no obvious way in. And yet, as I stared at it longer, I could have sworn I saw something shift in the metal. Just a ripple, a slight twitch, as if the surface was breathing. I backed away, heart thudding. I didn't know what was behind that door, but I knew one thing for sure. It was still in there, and it was waiting. I found the journal in a drawer that didn't exist yesterday. It was late, after midnight, I think. The house had gone quiet in the way old places do. Not silent, exactly, but alive with its own sounds. The creak of wood contracting, the faint rattle of wind against the windows, and, underneath it all, the hum of something I couldn't quite place. I've been unable to sleep, pacing from room to room, feeling like the walls were watching me breathe. I ended up in my father's study again. It still smelled like him, tobacco, leather, and something bitter like old medicine. Most of the books were ones I remembered from childhood. War histories, survival guides, thick manuals with faded titles. But one of the drawers in his desk had always been stuck, sealed tight like it hadn't been used in decades. That night, I pulled it open with hardly any effort. Inside was the journal. It was bound in dark leather, cracked and soft from age, its cover blank. No name, no title, just a single black ribbon hanging from the pages like a whisper. I sat in his old chair and opened it. The first page simply read, "If you found this, then I failed." My hands felt cold, though the room wasn't. I turned the pages slowly, careful not to tear them. His handwriting was neat at first, sharp letters in black ink. The early entries were logical, almost scientific. Notes about the construction of the bunker, inventory lists, maintenance dates. Mentions of radiation shielding, concrete depth, air filtration systems. Then the tone changed. Around page 20, the entry shifted. The writing got messy, slanted. The ink bled into the page as if his hand had been shaking. The door hums at night. Heard breathing again. Thought it was my own until it echoed. I leaned closer, the edges of the journal brushing my fingers like dry leaves. There were drawings, too. Small, frantic sketches of the door. But the door didn't look right. It was exaggerated, taller than it should be, with strange symbols scratched into the metal. Symbols I had never seen before. I flipped to a section that had been dog-eared several times. The writing here was worse, erratic, frantic. Dreams are different now. They aren't mine. Woke up with dirt under my nails, blood in my mouth. Can't remember leaving the bed. It's learning me. Watching through the keyhole, I won't give it. I stopped reading for a moment, heart thudding against my ribs. The silence in the house seemed heavier now, pressing down from the ceiling, like the walls had shifted an inch closer. Still, I turned the page. Fabio said we were chosen, that the Carraways were meant to keep the thing sealed, that our blood was the lock. I didn't believe him, not until the door spoke. It said my name. It said it remembered my mother. I slammed the journal shut. The silence broke with the sound, echoing off the study walls. I sat there, gripping the journal tight in my lap, suddenly aware of how deep the night had gotten. The air in the room felt stale, almost sour, like something old had been breathing here long before I arrived. I didn't sleep that night. I placed the journal in the drawer again, but not the same one. I didn't want it near the desk. I hid it under a loose floorboard in my bedroom closet. I don't know why I did that, only that I needed it out of sight, but not gone, because deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. My father had spent his life keeping secrets, and now he was gone. The door was still there, and whatever was behind it, it was waiting for me, and maybe, just maybe, it already knew I was coming. The power flickered again last night. It started with a low hum, the kind that creeps up the spine, the kind that feels like it doesn't belong in the air. I was in the study, going through more of my father's things, when the lamp beside me dimmed and buzzed like a dying insect. For a second, I thought it might just be the old wiring. This house has always had its quirks. But then the hum changed. It didn't fade. It shifted like it was alive. The sound seemed to come from the floorboards beneath me. I set the journal down. My hands were colder than they should have been. I told myself it was nothing, just an old house groaning. But the moment I stood up, I heard it. A whisper, clear as breath in my ear. I froze. My mouth went dry. The room was empty, of course it was, but I spun around anyway. Nothing. Just the tall bookshelf, the cracked wallpaper, the heavy silence pressing in. But I know what I heard. It wasn't a word, just a whisper, soft and low, like someone exhaling a secret they weren't sure I was ready to hear. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I found myself back at the bunker entrance, flashlight in hand, barefoot on cold stone steps. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought I'd find something concrete, some proof that I wasn't losing my mind. But what I found was worse. The air down there had changed. It was damp before, sure, but this time it fell thick, like it clung to my skin, like it had weight. The flashlight flickered as I moved deeper in, casting shaky shadows across the shelves lined with old ration cans and gas masks. And then I saw it. The door. That damn door. It stood exactly where it always had, at the far end of the bunker, heavy and rusted, streaked with years of decay. But it looked different now. The metal shimmered slightly, just around the edges, like it had been touched recently. Or maybe breathed on. I took a step closer, then another. There was a moment, just a breath, where the air turned ice cold. And the whisper came again, louder this time. It didn't come from behind me. It came from behind the door. I dropped the flashlight. It clattered to the floor, spinning, throwing mad shapes across the walls. And in that moment of chaos, I saw something that didn't belong. A shape, a long, thin shadow on the wall across from the door. Too tall, too still, gone when I blinked. My heart hammered in my chest as I grabbed the flashlight and backed away. I didn't take my eyes off that door until I was halfway up the stairs. Back in my room, I tried to tell myself it was just stress, just my mind playing tricks on me. But when I reached for my father's journal again, I noticed something I hadn't before. There was a line I swear wasn't there the last time I read it. The door knows when you're near. It listens. And sometimes it answers. The ink was darker than the rest. Fresher. I stared at those words until the morning light crept through the window. And all I could think was this. What if the door really is listening? What if now it's waiting for me to speak back? I first heard the knocking just after midnight. Slow, deliberate. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the old house like a judge's gavel. I sat up in bed, heart already racing. The wind outside had died hours ago, and the house had been silent since then. Too silent. The knocking came again. I slipped out of bed, grabbing the flashlight I kept by the nightstand. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I made my way downstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The front door stood like a black shape at the end of the hall. I hesitated, hand hovering over the deadbolt. The third knock came while I was still reaching. Closer. Louder. Who is it? I called, my voice thinner than I liked. Silence. Then a familiar voice, rougher now, more gravel than I remembered. It's me, Navis. Open the door. I froze. That voice hadn't spoken to me in nearly 10 years. Uncle Fabio. Yeah. He sounded tired. Let me in. I hesitated, fingers twitching at the bolt. The last time I saw Fabio, we were both younger, angrier. He'd disappeared after a screaming match with my father. Nobody had heard from him since. I unlocked the door. He looked older than I expected, weathered, like something left too long in the sun. His once dark hair had gone gray at the edges, and his eyes, sharp as broken glass, studied me like I was something fragile. You look just like him, he said. Not warmly, not kindly, just stating a fact. He stepped inside without asking. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air in the room seemed to shift. He didn't say much as I led him to the kitchen. Just a few nods, a grunt. I made coffee, even though neither of us drank much of it. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost whispering. You found it, didn't you? I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to. The bunker, I said. Yeah, I found it. He rubbed his temples and sat down heavily at the table, like the weight of the word itself had knocked something loose in him. You shouldn't have gone in there, Navis. You damn well know that. No, I didn't know, I snapped. Dad never told me anything. He just said to stay out. That's not the same as an explanation. Fabio looked up sharply. For a second, I saw something in his eyes, fear. Deep, animal fear. That's because he didn't trust himself to explain it without breaking something. You think he was paranoid? He was trying to protect you from a truth that eats men alive. I didn't answer. He leaned forward, his voice trembling now, not from weakness, but from pressure, like something barely held back. There's something behind that door, Navis. It's not a thing, not a person, not a ghost or a demon or anything you can describe. It remembers. It copies. It learns. His hands were shaking. I've heard it. In dreams, in the walls. It speaks in my voice sometimes, even when I'm awake. And I know damn well what that means. I felt cold all over. It's been down there since before the bunker was built. Before this house was even a thought. They just built over it to keep it buried. To make sure no one would ever open it. I stared at him. Who's they? Fabio looked at me. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then, men who knew what fear really was. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. I need to see it, he finally said, standing up. I need to make sure it's still asleep. My skin prickled. You said never to open the door. I didn't say I'd open it. He looked me dead in the eye. I said you shouldn't. Before I could respond, he walked to the living room window and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, the trees swayed lightly, though there was no wind. It knows you're here now, he said quietly. It's already inside your thoughts. That's what it does. It waits. And when someone comes too close, it starts waking up. My stomach turned. A part of me wanted to scream at him to leave, to get out and never come back. But another part, the part one was starting to hate, wanted to hear more. Because deep down, I knew he was telling the truth. And worse, I knew I was already too far in to walk away. I didn't sleep that night. The journal lay open on my chest as I stared at the ceiling, eyes dry, thoughts running in every direction like startled deer. I had read the same sentence over and over again. The door feeds on silence. It thrives in our forgetting. It made no sense. And yet, it felt true. Sometime just before dawn, I gave up on sleep entirely. The house was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Every board in the floor, every creak of the walls felt louder than usual. I made coffee, more for the ritual than the caffeine. I needed something normal, something to ground me. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard the knock. 3 slow raps. Solid. Too confident to be a neighbor. Too early to be a delivery. I opened the front door, and there he was. Fabio. He stood in the same long coat he used to wear when I was a kid, but it was frayed now, soaked at the edges by the morning mist. His gray streak hair was longer than I remembered, and he looked thinner, like someone who had spent years in hiding. But his eyes, they were sharp. Too sharp. Hello, Navis, he said, like he hadn't vanished 20 years ago. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let him in. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something colder, heavier, like inevitability. We sat in the kitchen, the silence stretching too long. The steam from his coffee curled upward, untouched. You've been in the bunker, he finally said. Yeah, I replied. I've been in the bunker. I've also read Dad's journal. Fabio's expression didn't change. He only nodded, like he'd been expecting that. Like this was all playing out exactly how he thought it would. You shouldn't have gone down there, he said. You mean the door? I leaned forward. What's behind it? What's the thing Dad was so afraid of? What were you all trying to hide? He stared into his cup for a long moment. Then he looked up at me. It's not about hiding. It's about containing. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Yellowed. Edges frayed. I unfolded it and saw a sketch of the door. Ours, but older. And around it, symbols. Circles, eyes, lines like tangled roots. At the bottom, handwritten in trembling ink, seal 1 of 3. Initiated 1962. Is this real? I whispered. Fabio nodded. We were part of something bigger. During the Cold War, the government built bunkers, not just to survive nuclear war, but to lock away things they couldn't explain. Some of them weren't man-made. He took another slow sip of coffee. Our family volunteered, he said. At least, that's how they framed it. We were told it was patriotic. We were told we'd be protectors. What they didn't say was that the thing down there doesn't forget. And it doesn't forgive. I felt my skin crawl. Dad knew. I asked. Fabio's jaw tightened. He knew. We all did. But he started slipping. Hearing it more. Dreaming about it. He tried to seal it again, but it wasn't enough. The rituals need blood. They need memory. He didn't have the strength. He paused. His hands trembled slightly as he set the coffee down. Do you know why it whispers to you now? He asked. Because it's been waiting. It can't open the door from its side. But if it can convince you to open it. Why me? I asked. Why now? Because you're the last Caraway, he said softly. And it's smart. It remembers us. It remembers you. I leaned back, cold settling in my spine. The whispers. The dreams. the pressure in my skull, every time I stood near that damn door. I need to see more, I said, voice shaking. I need to know everything. Fabio shook his head. Curiosity is how it gets in. That's how it started with your father. And your grandfather. That's how it always starts. I stood up. Then tell me. Now. Or I go back into that bunker and open the door myself. He looked at me long and hard. There was something behind his eyes. Fear, yes, but also pride. He stood up too, slowly, like every bone in his body ached. Then it's time you saw what we've been hiding. He reached into his coat again and pulled out a rusted key. Different from the ones I'd found. Older. Not everything is in the journal, he said. Some truths were buried deeper. And with that, he walked toward the basement door. I followed. The house groaned as we descended. And somewhere below, beyond steel and concrete and secrets, I swear the door whispered my name. It sounded almost pleased. I didn't want to watch it. In the quiet of the basement, with only the hum of the fridge and the sound of my own breathing, I stood there for what felt like hours. The 8mm film reel in my hands, still wrapped in its brittle, yellowed packaging, stared back at me like a guilty secret. Every inch of my skin felt cold, my pulse racing in anticipation, but the desire to know overpowered the fear. I set the film down on the old projector, the one that had sat and used for decades, covered in a fine layer of dust. It creaked when I turned the crank, and the bulb flickered before glowing faintly. The sound of the film clicking through the projector was louder than it should have been, like it was echoing across the entire house. The first few frames were a blur, grainy, static-filled images, too faint to make out. But then, slowly, shapes started to form. Faces. Familiar faces. My father, young, wearing that same tired expression he always had when he was working in the garden, appeared on the screen. My grandfather, too, his sharp features exaggerated in the dim light. And then, there was someone else. A man I didn't recognize. The scene shifted again, and that's when my heart dropped into my stomach. They were dragging something, or someone, across a concrete floor. The figure was large, too large for a normal person, and its body seemed to ripple unnaturally. The man's face was hidden beneath layers of filthy cloth, but I could see the shape of his body twisting in ways that didn't make sense. A head too large for his shoulders, limbs bent at impossible angles. I leaned forward, my eyes burning with the need to understand what I was seeing. My hand shook so badly that I had to steady the film, forcing the projector to catch up. The figure was dragged into a room. The walls were cold stone, ancient-looking. I recognized the place immediately. The bunker. My chest tightened. Then, the screaming started. Not from the figure, no. The sound was coming from somewhere else. From the people in the room. My grandfather, my father, and the others, they were all screaming. Not from pain, but from terror. It was a high-pitched wail that rattled my teeth, an animalistic sound that made my skin crawl. I should have turned it off. I should have stopped right there. But I couldn't. I was transfixed. The footage jolted again. My father, young but already looking worn, stepped forward, holding a strange, jagged object in his hands. It wasn't a weapon. Not exactly. More like a tool. Something ceremonial. He approached the figure on the ground and knelt beside it. I could see his breath, ragged, his eyes wide with panic. There was something wrong with the air. Thick, oppressive. My mind was screaming at me to look away, but I couldn't. Help me. A voice whispered from the projector's tinny speakers. It was faint at first, like a crackling electrical sound, but then it became clearer. It was my voice. I nearly fell off my chair, my heart lurching in my chest. The voice had come from the film. It was mine. I jumped up, ripping the film from the projector, my pulse pounding in my ears. I stared at it for a long time. My hands shook as I ran them through my hair. I had to force myself to breathe, but even the air in the room felt wrong now, heavy with the scent of something old, something buried. I felt watched, like I was no longer alone. The whispers started again. Faint, like they had been earlier, but this time they weren't coming from the walls. They were coming from inside my own head. "You're so close," the voice said, not from the film, but from somewhere deeper. It was as if the thing behind the door, the thing in the bunker, was speaking directly to me. It knew my thoughts, knew my name. I slammed the film reel back into its case, and my hands were slick with sweat. I tried to tell myself that what I saw was nothing more than the paranoia of an old man, a hoarder's delusion. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was too real, too twisted to ignore. I thought about what my father had written in his journal. The thing watching, the thing waiting. It wasn't just a fear, a superstition. It was real, and it was down there, behind that door. My mind kept returning to the most chilling part of the footage. My father had been part of it. He had helped them do something. A ritual? A sacrifice? I didn't know. But it was clear, whatever it was, whatever they had locked away, it was still waiting, still learning. And now I was part of it. Part of the legacy. Part of the family's curse. I took one last look at the projector, the screen still flickering in the dim basement light. There was a faint outline of the figure in the frame. Its eyes, those black, endless eyes, staring back at me from the film. The whispers started again. Louder this time. I needed to know. I had to find out what was behind the door. But I was already afraid. Terrified of what would happen once I did. I woke up to the sound of something rattling, like old bones scraping against the floor. At first, I thought it was the house settling, the heavy timbers groaning under the weight of its history. But then I realized that I was alone in the house. The rattling was too deliberate, too steady. I didn't want to go down to the bunker. Something in my gut was telling me that opening that door would be a mistake. But I couldn't help myself. I needed to know. The whispers were louder now, no longer just at the edge of my hearing, but in my mind like a melody that keeps playing over and over until it takes root in your brain. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could fight the urge to listen. That's when Fabio showed up. He came out of nowhere, just appeared in the doorway as if he'd been waiting outside for hours, his face shadowed, eyes gleaming in the dark. The last time I saw him was years ago, and the sight of him now made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. His presence was unsettling, like a reminder of something I couldn't quite place. He stepped into the kitchen, his boots heavy on the old wooden floor. I could smell the stale scent of his military-issued jacket, the musk of dirt and sweat, and something sharp beneath it, something like fear. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching me like a hawk. "Don't," he finally said, his voice low, almost a whisper, but it cut through the tension in the room. "Don't open that door, Navis." I clenched my fists, feeling the anger flare up inside me. "You don't get to tell me what to do anymore, Fabio. You're not my father." Fabio's lips twisted into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your father's gone, Navis. That's why I'm here." He took a step closer. "You think you know what's down there? What that door really is? What's been hiding all these years?" I swallowed hard, but the words wouldn't come. There was a part of me that had always known he was right. Deep down, I'd always known something was wrong with that door. Something was wrong with all of this. My father's obsession, his secrecy. It wasn't just fear. It was something else. But the truth, the full truth, I wasn't ready for that. "You don't understand," Fabio continued, his voice barely above a murmur now, like he was sharing some deep, buried secret. "That door is not just a door, Navis. It's a prison. It was built to hold something we were never meant to contain. The Carraways, our family, we've been guarding it for generations. But it's getting harder. We can't keep it locked forever." I shook my head. "This is insane. This is exactly what Dad wrote about. The door whispering. What the hell are you talking about?" Fabio's eyes darkened, and for the first time, I saw something raw, something almost vulnerable in his face. "What your father knew, what I know, is that there's something in there. Something that's not just alive, but aware. It waits. It learns. The more we try to keep it locked away, the stronger it gets. And now you've been called. You can't turn back." I backed away from him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell are you saying?" "I'm saying you've already opened the door in your mind," Fabio said, his voice trembling with something I couldn't place. "Fear? Or was it regret? You've been hearing it too, haven't you? The whispers? The thing in the dark? It's not just a memory. It's alive. And it wants you." My breath hitched as something cold washed over me. The whispers. I couldn't deny them anymore. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But now, hearing Fabio's words, I wasn't so sure. Maybe I hadn't been hearing things at all. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream and tear the walls down just to escape that place, that feeling. But I couldn't. I was trapped. And deep inside, I knew I'd been trapped long before I stepped foot into the bunker. Fabio took another step forward, slowly pulling at his jacket, revealing something on his chest. Something that made my stomach churn. A scar. But not just any scar. This one was old, jagged, and swollen. It looked like it had been carved into his flesh, deep and deliberate. "This is the mark of the ritual," he said quietly. "The mark of the wardens. Your grandfather, my father, they did it too. It was part of the binding spell. A price to keep it sealed. It's the only thing that kept it from getting out. And now, it's asking for more." I couldn't breathe. My gaze was fixed on the scar, the rawness of it, the pain that still lingered in the skin. "What did they do to you, Fabio? What did they do to you?" "They cut us open. Carved us, just like this. Gave their blood to make sure the door stayed shut." He looked down at the scar, as if it was a part of him he could never escape. "It's not just a door, Navis. It's a curse. And now it's yours. You're going to have to decide, let it out or keep it locked in. But I'm telling you, if you open it, it will take everything. It will take you." His words echoed in my head long after he left. I stayed in that cold, dimly lit kitchen, staring at the empty doorway where he'd been. Part of me wanted to believe he was just crazy, paranoid. But deep down, that same voice in the back of my mind, the one that had been whispering for days, weeks, was growing louder. And now I was listening. I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was time. The door would open. But I didn't know if I'd survive what was behind it. The bunker was colder than I remembered, even though I'd only been gone a few hours. The walls seemed to press in on me, suffocating the air, filling the space with a damp, metallic smell. It felt wrong, like something ancient had been waiting here far longer than I'd ever known. I stood at the foot of the rusted door, my hand hovering over the cold, iron handle. It was heavier than I expected, though I'd touched it countless times as a child, never questioning why I wasn't allowed to open it. Now, as an adult, I could feel the weight of it pressing on my chest. It wasn't just a door. It was a promise, a curse, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The journal my father had kept haunted me. Every page scratched out in fevered writing, every word slashing at the remnants of my sanity. I couldn't make sense of it all. The symbols, the warnings, the strange things he'd written as his handwriting became less coherent, more frantic. "It waits," one line read. "It learns." But there was one more entry, buried deep in the back, almost hidden. "Once it's free, there's no going back. No one can stop it." I should have listened to that last part. Should have walked away. But the whispers had begun again, louder this time, not just in the silence of the bunker, but in my dreams, creeping into the corners of my thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was calling to me, that whatever was locked behind that door was waiting for me to finally acknowledge it. The room behind the door was too quiet, too still. My breath came in shallow bursts, my hands clammy on the handle. I turned it, slowly, as if I could stop the inevitable. The lock creaked in protest, then gave way with a snap. It felt like the very air had been holding its breath, and now it could finally exhale. I stepped back as the door swung open with a sickening groan, revealing the chamber beyond. It wasn't like the rest of the bunker. This room didn't feel like a product of man. It felt older, as though it had been carved from stone long before the first humans had set foot on this land. The walls were covered in strange symbols, runes I didn't recognize, jagged and unsettling, like the language of something that had no place in this world. And then I saw it. At the center of the room stood a figure, tall, impossibly thin, draped in a fabric that shimmered faintly, almost like skin. It was still, unnaturally so. The air around it seemed to distort, bending the light as though it didn't quite belong in the same space as me. My heart skipped in my chest. I couldn't tell if it was a statue, a person, or something else entirely. "Who are you?" I whispered, though I knew it wouldn't answer. I didn't expect it to. But then, in the silence that followed, it did. A voice. No, not a voice, a sound, a vibration that ran through the walls and into my bones, mimicked my words, distorting them. My own voice. "Who are you?" I stumbled back, the words crawling under my skin, twisting in my mind. My stomach churned. I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot, as if the very air had trapped me here, forcing me to face whatever this thing was. It took a step forward, its movement fluid, almost too fluid. The air around it rippled. I couldn't tell if it was a person or something else, something inhuman that wore the guise of a man. Its face was hidden beneath a veil, its form barely discernible beneath the draped fabric. But somehow I knew with a certainty that shook me to my core, that it was waiting for me to do something. The whispers were louder now, and for a brief, horrible moment, I thought I saw the thing's face. No, not a face, just a blank space where a face should have been, smooth and featureless, like the surface of a mirror just before you shatter it. I didn't know if I was seeing it with my eyes or my mind, but the image burned itself into my brain. It beckoned to me, the way the ocean calls to a sailor stranded on a sinking ship, offering the promise of release, of understanding, of something I couldn't quite grasp. And I wanted to understand. I wanted to know what it was, what it had been, what could give me. But the price. I wasn't sure I could afford it. My uncle's voice broke through the fog of confusion that had begun to settle over me. "You don't know what you're doing," Fabio said, his words sharp and panicked, breaking the stillness. He had forced his way into the bunker, though I hadn't heard him approach. I barely registered him standing in the doorway, his face pale, eyes wide, and sweat slicking his forehead. "You don't know what you're about to unleash." I didn't turn to look at him, couldn't tear my gaze from the figure before me. I felt an odd, terrible connection forming between us, an unspoken understanding that had been there all along, waiting for me to find it. "It has to be done," I said, my voice strange, distant even to me. "It has to be." Fabio stepped forward, his boots thudding against the floor as if he were wading through water. "Navis, stop. You don't understand. Whatever that thing is, whatever it wants, it's been waiting for centuries. We can't control it. You can't." "I'm not asking for control," I said, still unable to tear my eyes from the veiled figure. "I'm asking for the truth." And as I spoke those words, the air grew heavier, the room colder. The whispers, no longer just in my ears, began to circle inside my skull, louder, clearer, until it was all I could hear. The thing before me, whatever it was, reached out a long, skeletal hand, its fingers brushing the edge of my consciousness. "You will see it," it whispered, its voice now blending with mine, thick with the promise of things that should not be known. And I knew, deep down, that this was no longer just about a door. It was about breaking the seal on something far worse than I could ever imagine. But it was too late to turn back now. The door had been opened. The truth, whatever it was already beginning to crawl out, and I was its next victim. I stood in front of the door, trembling. I could feel its weight, the presence behind it, like a constant pressure against my chest. It was as if something beyond the metal walls had been watching me, waiting for me to make this decision. And now I had. The rusted lock was cold in my hands. It was the last barrier, the last thing between me and whatever had haunted this family for generations. The key turned with a dull creak, and the door groaned, as though it were alive and reluctant to let me through. I hesitated. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was something else, something deeper, that wanted to stay closed forever. But I couldn't turn back. Not now. With a sharp breath, I pushed the door open. At first, all I saw was darkness. Thick, suffocating shadows clung to the air. My heartbeat echoed in the silence, my breath shallow as I stepped forward, the only sound my boots scraping against the concrete floor. The room smelled stale, like old stone and forgotten things. There was a heaviness, an oppressive weight that made every movement feel slow, deliberate, like the air itself was thick with secrets. I flicked the flashlight on, its beam cutting through the blackness. The walls were lined with symbols, ancient, twisted shapes carved into the stone. My stomach churned as I traced the markings with my eyes. They weren't just symbols. They were alive in a way, pulsating, faintly glowing, as if they had been waiting for me. The air felt alive, too, like it was pressing in from all sides. I couldn't breathe properly, like every inhale was a step deeper into something I wasn't meant to know. And then, at the center of the room, I saw it. The figure was tall, unnaturally tall. It stood completely still, like a statue, draped in what looked like tattered, flesh-like cloth. But it wasn't cloth. Not really. It was something more wrong. It was alive. I could feel it. Even without seeing its face, I knew that it was looking at me. Its presence was overwhelming, like 1,000 eyes upon me all at once, none of them kind. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared. The air felt like it had turned to syrup, thick and cloying. But I couldn't tear my eyes away. A whisper. Not a sound, not words, but a feeling. Something that brushed against my mind, cold and alien. And then, like a cold hand gripping my heart, the voice spoke. I know you. The voice was mine. It was my own voice, but twisted wrong. It sent a chill crawling up my spine. I took a step back, my feet unsteady. What are you? I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I wanted to know the answer. The figure didn't move, but the words came again. I've always been here. Watching. Waiting. I shook my head, my mind spinning. The things I had read in the journal, the whispers, the warnings, it was all connected to this. To whatever it was. My stomach tightened, ball rising in my throat. I've been waiting for you. The voice continued. For the one who would open the door. I didn't understand. Couldn't understand. It was as if my own mind was unraveling in front of me, piece by piece. What do you want? I managed to choke out. The figure tilted its head slightly. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement behind the veil, but it was gone in an instant. I don't want. I don't need. I am. The air around me seemed to thicken even more. I could feel the walls pressing in, suffocating me with their weight. My head swam as a flood of images hit me all at once. Faces. People I didn't recognize. My family. My father. Fabio. All of them, somehow, connected to this thing, this entity. My father's journal had spoken of it, but the truth was far worse than I could have imagined. The thing behind the veil wasn't just a prisoner. It wasn't just something my family had contained for safety. It was something ancient, something beyond understanding. And my family had never been its wardens. They had been its keepers, its prison guards. We had been complicit in its existence. The truth crashed over me like a wave, drowning me in its depth. The entity spoke again, its voice low and resonant. You were born for this. For me. My hands trembled as I raised them to my head, feeling like the walls of my own mind were closing in on me. The truth was too much to grasp. My father had known. Fabio had known. And now so did I. And I understood. This was no curse. No punishment. This was a pact. A blood oath, passed down through generations. My family had made a deal with this thing centuries ago, and I had been born to fulfill it, to be the one to open the door, to let out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I wanted to run, to escape. But the weight of it all, the truth, the thing that had been locked away, waiting for me, it anchored me in place. I'm not your enemy. The voice whispered, closer now, as if it were right next to me, breathing with me. I am what you are meant to become. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. All I could hear was my heartbeat, pounding in my ears, louder than the whispers. And then, as I stood there, frozen, I realized the truth was already unfolding. The door had been opened, and nothing could stop what had already begun. I never thought it would end like this. Maybe I always knew. Maybe the door had been waiting for me, drawing me toward it since I was a child. I thought I could control it. I thought I was smarter than my family's curse. But when the darkness swallowed me whole and I heard that voice, my voice, not mine, I understood. I was just another pawn. The air in the bunker felt thick, like the weight of centuries was pressing down on me, suffocating me. The door creaked open, and I stepped into the chamber, each step echoing in the cavernous space. I could barely breathe, but it wasn't from the musty air or the stale earth. No, it was something deeper, a pressure on my chest, something ancient and primal, like the earth itself had a secret had been keeping from me. In the center of the room stood the thing. At first, I thought it was a statue. Tall, thin, covered in dark cloth. But there was something wrong with it. Something alive. I couldn't tell if it had a face. It was veiled, the cloth a dark, almost liquid black that seemed to shimmer unnaturally in the dim light. But when I looked at it, I felt it looking back. No, that's not right. It didn't just look at me. It knew me. I stepped closer, heart hammering in my chest, and that's when it spoke. Or at least, I thought it spoke. It wasn't a sound, not really. It was more like a voice in my head. My voice. Navis. It whispered, and it sounded like a mockery of everything I was. It's good to finally meet you. I've been waiting. I froze, my hand still gripping the door handle. I could feel my fingers trembling, but I couldn't move. The words, my words, stuck in my throat, caught between fear and confusion. I should have turned around and run. I should have locked the door again. But something kept me there, rooted to the spot, like I was in the middle of a dream I couldn't wake up from. Navis, the voice repeated. This time, it was softer, almost coaxing. You're so much more than they ever told you. You're the one who was meant to understand. I backed up, but I didn't leave. My legs were shaking, but I couldn't make the move. It felt like the very walls of the bunker were closing in, pressing me closer to the thing in the center of the room. I didn't hear Fabio at first. He was silent, like a ghost. When I finally turned to look, I saw him standing by the doorway, eyes wide, his face pale as death. His lips were trembling, but not from fear. It was something else, something darker. Navis, get away from it, he rasped, his voice strained, like he was trying to warn me and himself at the same time. But I couldn't tear my gaze away from the thing in the center of the room. My hands were shaking now, too, not from the cold, but from the realization. The truth was right in front of me. The door, the whispers, the strange dreams. It was all connected. This wasn't a thing that could be locked away. It had always been waiting for me. Fabio stepped forward, but then stopped. His eyes flicked to the sigil on his chest, the one he'd always kept hidden from me. Now it was raw, red, as though it had been carved only moments before. His breath came in shallow gasps, and I could see the desperation on his face. Navis, you have to close the door. You don't know what it wants. What we were meant to contain. I could barely hear him. The entity's voice filled my head again, louder this time. It didn't just speak anymore. It pierced me. You've always known, haven't you? No. I whispered, shaking my head. I don't understand. I don't. You're my chosen, the thing said again, cutting me off, just as your father was, and your grandfather. This family was meant to protect me. The door was never meant to stay shut. I shook my head, dizzy now, like the room was spinning around me. I wanted to scream, to run, to leave, but I couldn't. There was no escape. Not anymore. Fabio took a step forward, his eyes frantic. Navis, listen to me. We're all bound by this. It's too late. I can't let you. Before he could finish, the ground shook. I stumbled, reaching out for something. Anything to steady myself, but there was nothing. The entity stirred. It shifted, its dark cloth moving as though it had a life of its own. The air grew colder. The whispers came faster, sharper, louder. Fabio didn't hesitate this time. He rushed to the center of the room, pushing me aside with a strength I didn't know he had. His face was grim, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not the fear of the unknown, but the kind of fear that came from knowing exactly what was about to happen. No, I shouted. Fabio, don't. But it was too late. He placed his hand on the ground, the sigil on his chest glowing faintly in the dim light. There was a flash of blinding red. I heard him muttering something, words that were like nothing I'd ever heard before. The air crackled with energy, and I felt it in my bones. A sound, like the earth itself groaning, filled the room. No, Fabio. I screamed, trying to reach for him, but my feet wouldn't move. The entity moved, its veiled face lifting. It let out a sound that was like a scream, but not a human one. It was ancient, guttural, hungry. Fabio didn't flinch. He continued to chant, his hands shaking as he pressed harder into the ground. The energy pulsed, the sigil on his chest flaring with a blinding light. And then, with a final, gut-wrenching scream from the entity, the world went dark. I don't know how long I stood there after the ritual. The room was still, silent. I couldn't hear the whispers anymore. The air had changed, as if the entire space had taken a collective breath and held it. I stumbled forward, my heart racing, but Fabio was gone, vanished like smoke in the wind. The door slammed shut, sealing the chamber. I was alone. I don't know how I got back to the house. I don't know how long I stood at the top of the stairs in the cold, staring at the darkened door to the bunker. But I know one thing. The door is still sealed, but the whispers have never stopped. The house feels colder now, even though the fire is still burning in the hearth. It's a different cold, the kind that sinks into your bones and hangs in the air long after you think you've warmed up. I don't sleep much anymore, not since that night. Sometimes, when the shadows stretch too far, I think I hear the whispers. They're never loud, never clear, but I know they're there. Always there. I've tried to ignore it. Tried to convince myself it's just the house settling, the wind scraping against the walls. But I know better now. The door's still there, deep underground, waiting. And I'm the one watching it. I stand at the edge of the old cellar, the trapdoor above creaking as I lean over. I don't need to open it anymore. The bunker's never far from my mind. It's as though a part of me lives down there, behind that door, trapped with whatever it is, whatever I freed that night. I can still feel its presence. I don't know what I expected when I opened the door, but I know it wasn't that. That thing, it wasn't human. It wasn't anything I could name. And when it spoke, its voice, my voice, sounded like 1,000 other voices mixed together, murmuring things I didn't understand. Things that twisted in my head until I couldn't tell if I was hearing the past or the future. It tried to make me want it, whatever it was. Tried to convince me to let it out. But I resisted. I thought I did. I thought I'd stopped it. I was wrong. Fabio's blood still stains the ground down there. I thought it would be different, that sealing it back up would undo everything. But nothing's ever that easy. Not in this house. Not with this family. What we were guarding wasn't meant to stay locked away. It was meant to be fed, contained, controlled. And I've learned too much to ignore it now. I wander into my father's study, the room I never spent enough time in. Dust sits on everything. His books, his papers, his old pipe. But it's not the dust I notice. It's the way the room feels. Still cold. Empty. I take a seat at his desk, looking out the window at the thick trees, their branches stretching against the sky like black fingers. There's a drawer I haven't opened yet, one I never thought to touch until now. Inside, I find more journals. Not just my father's this time, but older ones, my grandfather's, even his father's. They all have the same thing written in them, in different words, different languages, but the meaning never changes. It's time. The words hit me like a slap. It's as if I'm seeing it all clearly now. Every cryptic phrase, every warning, every piece of advice they'd left behind. They weren't just to protect us. They were protected. The thing in the bunker. The thing behind the door. Fabio told me the truth, even if he didn't mean to. He sacrificed himself to stop it, to keep it locked away. He thought he could contain it, but he was wrong. The door isn't a prison. It's a lure. And now it's calling me. I never thought I'd be the one to inherit the family curse. But here I am. My grandfather didn't do this for duty or for honor. Neither did my father. They did it because they had no choice. Because it's never about us. It's about what's locked up down there. I close the journal, the weight of it heavy in my hands. My palms sweat as I think about the door, the things my family has done to keep it locked. The rituals, the sacrifices, the whispers, they all led to this moment. And there's no turning back now. The thing behind the door isn't a threat anymore. It's a part of me. It's part of this family, part of this house, part of me. I can't deny it. Not anymore. I feel it pulling at me, this strange weight in my chest that tells me to go downstairs, to open the door. But I'm smarter than that, aren't I? I know better than to give in. But the truth gnaws at me, a quiet hunger in the back of my mind. You are the warden now, I tell myself. My father was the last. Fabio was the last before him. And now it's me. I'm the one who stands between it and the world. The one who keeps it locked away. The thing doesn't need to break free. Not anymore. It doesn't need to scream or claw or scratch its way out. It has me. It has always had me. I walk to the door, open it slowly, and step outside into the night. The wind is sharp, cutting through my jacket as I look up at the sky. The stars blink down at me like silent witnesses. The house feels different now. I can feel its eyes on me, even though I know it's just wood and stone. The whispers are louder tonight. I feel them in my head, in my chest, in my bones. I'm not afraid. I won't be. I can't be. Not anymore. I sit on the porch and stare into the darkness, knowing that the door is waiting for me, waiting for my next decision. And I'll be ready for it. Because the truth is, I want it. I've always wanted it. I am the warden. And I always will be. The door will never be opened again. Not unless I decide it.